There are stories that begin softly, like a whisper carried by a warm breeze. But this one does not. This story begins with a scream, the raw, trembling scream of a baby whose tiny chest heaved with fear every time his parents walked out the door. A scream so sharp that it cut through the walls of the quiet suburban home like an alarm nobody could shut off. And while everyone thought it was just separation anxiety, just a child missing his mother and father, only one person would live to discover the truth. And what she saw would shake her soul forever. If you believe kindness, compassion, and second chances still matter in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing stories like these to life. The Martinez family had recently moved into their new home in Colorado Springs, hoping for a fresh start after months of stress. They were young first-time parents. Michael and Sarah and their 9-month-old son, Aiden, had always been a gentle, cheerful baby. But something changed almost immediately after they settled into the new house. The moment Michael and Sarah picked up their keys to leave for work each morning, Aiden would begin to cry in a way no baby should have to cry, shaking, sweating, turning red, clinging to his crib rails like he was begging someone to save him. Yet the moment they returned home, he would go quiet, even smiling through remaining tears. Their pediatrician said it was not unusual for babies to struggle with transitions. Their friends told them to give it time. Their families said he was just sensitive. So the young couple tried to push through. After all, they both needed to work, and the bills piling up on the counter didn't care how hard parenting was. To help manage the house, they hired a part-time cleaner, a quiet middle-aged woman named Ruth Harper, who had lived in the area for decades and had raised 4 children of her own. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and never meddled in anyone's business. She had only one rule for her work: treat every home as if it belonged to her own family. And so she did. At first, Ruth barely interacted with Aiden beyond soft greetings while he played. But she quickly noticed a pattern. Every time Sarah and Michael prepared to leave, Aiden's entire body stiffened, as if bracing for impact. His lips would tremble, his eyes would widen, and within seconds, he would cry so violently it didn't sound like sadness. It sounded like terror. Once the door shut, the cries only grew louder. Ruth would hum, rock him, and try to soothe him, but he resisted even being held during those episodes. He would only grasp her tightly when the crying exhausted him, and he fell asleep against her shoulder. Still, Ruth told herself not to interfere. It wasn't her place. She was there to clean, not to question a family's struggles, but the unease lingered in the air like a silent shadow following her through the hallway. One Wednesday afternoon, things changed. Michael and Sarah were running late for work, and in their rush, they forgot to close the nursery door completely. Aiden was standing in his crib, clutching the bars, shaking as he whimpered. Sarah kissed him quickly before running out. Aiden's cries escalated immediately. Ruth stepped into the nursery, ready to calm him, when she noticed something she had never seen before. Aiden wasn't looking at the door his parents had just walked through. He was looking past Ruth, at the wall, specifically at a corner near the dresser where the light didn't seem to reach properly. Ruth turned, confused. The room was bright, painted a soft shade of yellow, decorated with animal decals and pastel blankets. Nothing seemed threatening, no sharp corners, no hanging objects, no shadows that were out of place. But Aiden stared at that corner with such intensity, as if he were watching something move. Ruth took a slow step toward the corner. Aiden screamed. It wasn't a normal baby cry, it was panic, pure panic. Ruth felt her stomach twist. She backed away, whispering softly until Aiden's cries softened. When she moved to the opposite side of the room, he calmed even faster. She tried again, stepping toward the corner. The baby erupted into screams. By then, Ruth had cleaned homes for nearly 25 years, and she had never seen a child react like that. Something wasn't right. And for the first time, she felt responsible, not because she was a cleaner, but because she was a mother. Someone who had once held her children through their own fears. That night, Ruth couldn't sleep. The image of Aiden's trembling face haunted her. It felt wrong to say nothing. But she also knew parents could be defensive, especially when exhausted. She didn't want to embarrass Michael or Sarah, and she didn't want to risk losing her job. The next day, she returned with a quiet determination to observe more carefully without overstepping. When Aiden's parents left, the crying began again, louder than ever. Ruth approached the crib, but didn't pick him up right away. She watched. His eyes darted toward that same corner, and for a brief second, Ruth felt a chill run down her arms. She forced a breath and shook it off. She needed to understand, not panic. After hours of careful cleaning, Ruth went back into the nursery. Aiden was asleep, cheeks wet, chest rising with fragile breaths. She sat beside the crib and muttered a small prayer under her breath, asking for guidance. Then she noticed something. A subtle draft. It was faint, barely perceptible, coming from the corner behind the dresser. She stood slowly, approached that corner, and pressed her palm against the wall. The surface was cold, far colder than the rest of the room. Ruth hesitated, then crouched down and ran her fingers along the floorboard. There was a tiny gap a shift between the wall and the floor that looked almost invisible unless someone was on their knees searching for it. Ruth grabbed a tissue and held it near the gap. It fluttered. There was airflow. A few seconds later, a sound came through. A soft, low hum, almost like whispering. Not words, not voices, but the kind of sound that immediately makes the human body tense because it doesn't belong. Ruth's entire body stiffened. Suddenly, Aiden jolted awake and cried again, eyes widening in terror as he stared directly at that corner. That was enough. Ruth didn't need permission to protect a child. When Michael and Sarah returned, they found Ruth pacing the hallway, clutching her cleaning cloth with trembling hands. She didn't want to frighten them, but she also knew she couldn't hide what she'd discovered. Before she could speak, Sarah ran to the nursery, hearing Aiden's cries echoing down the hall. She lifted him into her arms, tears forming in her eyes as he clung to her neck. Ruth gently cleared her throat. "Sarah, Michael, I think something's wrong with the nursery wall." The couple exchanged a startled glance. Sarah's voice was shaky when she replied, "What do you mean?" Ruth explained what she had seen and heard. The cold air, the strange hum, the gap behind the dresser, and Aiden's intense fear of that exact corner. Michael didn't want to believe it. He wanted an explanation grounded in logic. But after Ruth insisted, he agreed to move the dresser and inspect the wall. Behind the furniture was a small panel and access door no larger than a shoebox lid, likely meant for old wiring or insulation. It was loose, far too loose. Michael crouched down and slowly opened it. A sudden burst of cold air rushed out, carrying with it a faint buzzing noise, electrical, dissonant, unsettling. The space behind the wall housed old, deteriorating electrical wiring that had been left in dangerous condition by the previous homeowners. Several wires were exposed, sparking faintly against metal piping. Every time they crackled, the hum intensified. It wasn't paranormal, it wasn't mystical, it was dangerous. Aiden hadn't been afraid of nothing. He had instinctively sensed a threat, none of them. Understood. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming as she held her son tighter. Ruth felt her chest loosen, relieved that the true danger was exposed before tragedy struck. A licensed electrician later told them that the sparks could have easily caused a fire behind the wall, one that would have spread through the nursery first. And worse, the electrical buzzing might have been creating low-frequency vibrations known to distress infants deeply. Aiden hadn't been crying because his parents left him. He had been crying because when they left, he was trapped alone with a hidden danger. The Martinez family moved Aiden's crib to the opposite side of the house and scheduled immediate repairs. For the first time since moving in, he slept soundly. His cries disappeared almost overnight, replaced with soft giggles that filled the home like sunlight. Sarah hugged Ruth days later, telling her she would never be able to repay her for what she'd done. Ruth only smiled, wiping away tears, saying she had simply followed her heart, as any mother would. But the truth was, Ruth saved that family. Her intuition, her care, and her refusal to ignore a child's fear made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Before the story ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever felt something was wrong, even when no one believed you? In the weeks that followed, Michael and Sarah invited Ruth to dinner, not as their cleaner, but as part of their lives. They called her family. Aiden adored her, reaching for her every time she walked in, and Ruth felt something warm in her heart, a reminder that sometimes God places us exactly where we need to be to save someone else. Because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they carry cleaning cloths, soft prayers, and the courage to listen to the cries others overlook. And in that quiet Colorado home, a baby finally slept in. Peace, because one woman cared enough to notice the truth hidden in the corner of a room. Thank you for watching. May kindness find you exactly when you need it most.